Hi, and welcome to another episode of Top Vaults. And today we're going to be looking at the Jaguar Lister. It's the MM C56, first released in 1960 on their first edition catalogue. It's an absolute beautiful piece, one that you would love to add to your collection. For one, it's one of the simpler to work on, as this one doesn't have the lights, which came a little bit later on, around sort of 1962. But we're going to have a little look at this today, just have a little look around it, see if there's any visual damage from the outside first. I haven't actually opened this one up yet, so I'm kind of intrigued to see what's inside. First impressions, bodywork's in pretty sound condition. Little bit of warping, which is very normal for cars of this age. A bit of dirt inside there, a little bit of a crack to the screen. I don't know if you can see that. And underneath, the wheels are actually in good condition. That seems to move okay. And the pickups, one of them's actually broken. It looks still to be connected. Okay, so let's open this up. So first up, you have these two little clips, sort of like retaining clips, at the front and at the back. These literally pull out just ever so slightly. So you don't want to pull them out too far and force them out. They actually do stay in. So you just pull it out until you feel resistance. And then the same to the front, you pull out until you feel resistance. These can get worn and pulled all the way out, which isn't a problem. When you put them back in, they're still perfectly functional. So let's have a look at this. So the insides of the top of the body just needs a little light clean. I can't see any cracks or breaks inside there. All the points are still in point. That's great. Right, okay. So the usual hairs, quite a lot of sort of rubber build-up from the tyres and dirt. You know, these have been used on the floor and the carpet. It picks up all manner of stuff. And we've got, so that's all in very good condition. Place it there just for a moment. So the guides are still connected. What I love about these cars is the way the motor literally pivots on this hinge that they put in place. It's absolutely great. It all looks all original. This is all very light clean. All the teeth are intact. Once again, just hair sort of binding around the wheels. But we'll give this a little bit of a light lube as well, just with some very sort of lightweight oil. It'll be the same oil that I would use in the motor at the two separate points, which we can get onto a bit later. Now if we just inspect the motor, so these are an RX motor. This is the standard motor. It's not the race-tuned motors. Usually the race-tuned motors have a black casing, which is not always the case, but mostly. It's kind of a rule of thumb for myself, unless the car comes in a box with documentation showing it's race-tuned. It's very difficult to tell. Obviously, unless anybody else has got any other information that they want to leave in the comments, which would be much appreciated. So brushes look pretty good, but we'll take those off and clean those. Okay, so now we'll remove the motor. So down to removing the motor, we can very, very lightly pull just on the sides. So it doesn't take a lot, hardly any force at all, just to bring that across, if you can see that. Okay, with a tiny little rubber locator, which is also holds down the pickups. So when the top body goes on, it pushes down on this rubber, which in turn pushes down. So on the back, you've got these tiny locator just in the center there. So we'll put it to one side. So to remove the guide, you have two locators here, which we need to use a tool just to ease those out very carefully, not to break them, because as a car being from the 1960s, a lot of this plastic is going to be quite brittle, and parts are available, but quite a pain to get a hold of, especially if you can just be a little bit more careful, take your time, and remove those, just so we can resolder some new pickups on there. Now that we've loosened off the motor and that all seems good, the suppressor looks like it's in good condition. The suppressor being this small item there, which basically connects straight to the guides. And what this is meant to do is stop any interference, like with the radio or anything like that. I don't know too much about it, but looking online and researching it, that's what these suppressors are meant to be doing. So quite a good thing to have on there. Not all cars have got them, but it doesn't stop it running. So if you were to test it and want to use it, it will still be absolutely fine. But just a good item to keep on there, as it's original as well. So if we turn this around, support that. On the underside here, you've got two clips either side. So you want to carefully do is have a very small screwdriver and very carefully just press on one side and it pops through. On the other side, just press to one side and very carefully just press through, like so. And what that enables us to do is to remove this item there. Just place that to one side for now. Now this should enable us to release the guides very, very carefully. Okay, let's just rest it there for a second. So overall, really just a clean up and some oil placed on there. The pinion looks pretty good as well. Looks to be original. The pads here seem in good condition as well. Okay. Now onto the pickups. So you can see these have been fairly well used. See the wear and the tear on there. So we can put some new braids on there. Just basically what we'll do is we'll resolder the two ends. Yeah, and this one looks to have detached from the back there. So we can just resolder that on, just put a new braid on there. from the rear axle. You tend to find there's a bit of movement on these rear wheels, because you know they're no modern Scalextric car. There will be a bit of wobble in there. Obviously you can sort that out if you really wanted to, but myself, I tend to put these on the shelf and use them every now and again. With my young daughter, she loves to play with these with me. So really, I like to keep them in good sort of functional order. Never going to race them in competitions or anything like that. It's not really my bag. But I do enjoy working on them and just trying to keep them original. Try not to change too many parts if I can help it. So if we remove the rear axle, then we'll give this a nice clean. So the chassis, just a general clean really. You can just see just general dirt. So we'll get into this. Okay, so we'll just start with a light clean of the chassis. I tend to use a combination of makeup brushes. This is an old shaving brush, because they're quite soft, or very small paint brushes. Once again, they're very light, not likely to scratch or create any damage. So what I'll initially start with is just a light rub of the chassis, just to remove any sort of large areas. Just use the other brushes just to get into the corners. And just using a cotton wool bud just to remove those hard areas. You can see there's a fair amount coming off there. And then just the inside of the body shell. So once again, just a large brush, should I say. So this is just a very light clean. I'm not going to be going to town using alcohol and whatnot to clean this up, because it's not really at that stage. There's no kind of mold or anything like that growing on there, or you tend to get like this milky build up, which you can clean off with sort of detergents and whatnot, warm water, which we'll have a look at another video. What we want is just to try and remove any particles or dust that may get into the motor and cause problem with the brushes. And then one last brush. And then just inside where the driver is, you can see there's just a build-up of dirt and dust. Maybe a little bit of oil has got in there as well. And just allow the dust to cling to it. I think the fresh pad, just the inside of the window there, you can just very carefully rub there, because obviously we've got a little bit of a damage here. We don't want to knock or loosen anything off. Okay. Let's put that to one side. Okay, so we've got some tweezers here. So what we want to do, I don't know if you can see, there's a build up there. You can see that is typical, but that will create resistance, which will in turn strain the motor. There's a fair amount coming off there. Okay. It's moving much nicer. Okay, and what we'll do is just give it a tiny, tiny drop of oil, literally just where the bearing's going to sit. The tiniest amount. Because what you don't want to do is put a load of oil in there. It isn't really necessary, but if you put the tiniest amount in there, it does just aid the bearings there. Let's do the same to the front axle, which actually is clean. We have these spacers. It's really just a light brush. The tyres are actually not too bad. Okay, so onto the motor. As previously mentioned, this is an RX motor. Fairly widely used on a lot of the early cars, if not most. So we'll just give this a general clean. Overall, this does look in pretty good condition. All the wires seem to be, you know, all intact. There's no corrosion or impact damage or anything really in there. It's actually quite good. So what we'll do is we'll take the brushes off, give those a clean. So the way to do that is to very carefully loosen the spring. So there's a spring on the side, and if you very carefully pull that out as well. So the whole time I'm holding the brushes on both sides. So the brushes either side of the motor, I've actually got a very light grip on there. So we're going to very carefully remove those. So you see now that's loose. So holding the brush behind, we can very carefully remove this brush. We can see just needs a light clean either side. Tiny bit of carbon just on there, which is not an issue. We have the same again, just a bit of carbon. But the brushes, I've got plenty of meat still on there. So we'll give this just a very light clean on there, just so the contact is much nicer. So using that, we just use alcohol. And once again, very, very small amount. I literally just place it at the end of this bud and turn the motor, and you can actually see it's already cleaning up. There you go. So do another tiny, tiny little bit. Okay, perfect. And while the brushes are out the way, once again, we'll put a very, very tiny amount of oil, actually just on there. Allow it just to go through. And the same on the back. Just straight down on there. These are very small amounts of oil. Okay, perfect. And let's just give the brushes a very light clean as well. There's no need to rework the surface of that, as it's already been ground into the correct shape. So it's making it sort of optimal connection. As you can see, a fair amount has come off there as well. This is just good practice for maintaining your motor. It's nothing too involved. So now time to put the brushes back. What I may do is just give that a light clean just inside there. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So replace the brushes. Probably good practice to remember which way they went, just because of the way they're bedded in. Just place that back into there, and just place a little bit of pressure on that, and that will hold that brush in for you. Now the spring is back in place. We can see that they're sitting just perfect on that guide. Let's put that to one side. So the last thing will be the braids. So I'm going to set the soldering line up and we'll put some new braids on there. Okay, so on to soldering the braids. So what I tend to do is try and go from, say, from back to front, and then mark a tiny little 15mm, so 15mm from front to back. Just a tiny little mark so I know where I'm going to. And then using just a standard soldering iron, there's nothing special about this, it is just a soldering iron. And we just want to lightly just heat that up and lift that off. Okay. So when it comes to rebending of your braids, to get them back to be a nice curve on the pickup, what I tend to do is I get a 5.5mm drill bit. I then place the braid across the drill bit, just bending around just to give the general shape, because usually you have about 6mm in this curve, and as you can see it kind of works its way flat, and then just simply bend either side to give you the curve that you need, and then just cut them down. Tiny bit off the back. You want about sort of 5 to 6mm will probably be more than enough. Okay, just place those there. So now we've got solder on both sides. What we should probably do now, so just place it on there, and we're going to just stick a tiny amount of solder on both sides. As you can see, this is fairly fiddly, but patience is your best tool. Okay, perfect. So once again, I'll just heat this up. Okay, perfect. So 2 resoldered brushes. I do apologise for my soldering skills, they are not the best. I do tend to finish with a tiny light filing, just to take care of any points that I don't want oversailing. Which is perfect. A little bit on that one. Okay, that's great. And they do look fairly symmetrical. So where we want to do now is that we want to place, if you can see, there's 2 slots either side. So these brushes will literally sit straight into those slots with the tongue on the braid. You can see that sits in there just snug. Just like that. And then onto the second braid. Perfect. And they're just sitting in there quite snug. Okay. So then you want to place the guide back in to the slot. And they click straight down like that. Then you take your motor, and then the 2 guides either side, they sit into those same slots that the braids will sat in. What you want to do is very carefully just press that in so they fall into the same slots. You don't need to apply too much pressure, because you will find or feel that it will slot straight back into its original location. And then click the motor back into place, just like that. And then as you bring the motor back down, just pull it to the side and then guide that in. That's perfect. And then onto the front axle. When placing this back on, just try to keep these bushes to the sides. Brilliant. And then, as I mentioned before, you have this rubber locator, which also keeps all the guide and everything in place. And in the bottom, you've got a hole which sits straight onto this section there. So you just place that on, and it sits on there, perfect. And now ready for the body shell. So all we need to make sure is that the retaining pins are pulled clear, because what you don't want to do is put a body shell on and then try to force it on and bend or snap your retaining clips. So just place that on top, and turn it over, and then push. Like I said, don't force them in. They should just locate nicely, just like that. And using, just guide these over and just bend them in to the location they want. And you'll see there's the guide and there's the pickups. So that should work quite nicely. So all we've got, one thing left to do is to run this motor up and just make sure that everything's working as it should. Okay, so the last job is to just run the motor up, really, just to make sure it's operating as it should. It probably needs just a moment just to run in. So we'll just switch this on. I'll just lift the wheels clear. And I'll just start increasing the power. So we've got that running at just low revs, and I'll increase the power. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, well that completes the light cleaning service of this old Jaguar Lister 1960. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have any advice or comments, please leave them in the comment section, as myself and many others would appreciate any advice or your own personal experiences or the way you do things. Would be absolutely amazing to hear back. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.